If you were to ask me what the best boxing game was, I'm not sure I'd have an answer. Maybe Fight Night, or Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, or Ready to Rumble, I honestly don't know. What I do know is the new Switch game Boxing Champs is the easiest boxing game. While other pugilism simulators want you to master the deep gameplay and watch for openings, this cheapo title from Raz Games is content with letting you flail about with reckless abandon. It's the kind of boxing game where I didn't once feel like I was in any danger of losing, and even ended my career with a flawless record of 30 KOs and 0 losses. Look, I may not know what the best boxing game is, but I sure know that Boxing Champs isn't it. Played entirely from an overhead perspective, Boxing Champs is a fast and arcadey interpretation of the sport. You create your own character and take on the world in hopes of climbing the ranks and eventually winning a big, shiny belt. But before that happens, you'll first need to punch a couple dozen contenders in the face until they're knocked out, giving you a point you can use to upgrade the boxer. The goal is to earn your way up the leaderboard until you take on the greatest, an intimidating foe who hasn't lost in more than 40 fights. You take down these opponents with 3 different moves. You can jab, hook, and uppercut with both the left and right arms. All of these strikes take a small chunk out of your stamina bar, so you'll often need to hold back and block to fill up the gauge. There's also a button to mock the other fighter, just in case you want to rub it in. This is a simple game to learn, with a lot of enemies that can be taken down by simply button mashing. The problem with this game is that I've essentially explained every part of the action. You get into a bunch of fights that play out exactly the same way on identical looking levels. Most of the matches only last a minute or two and don't get out of the first round. You don't unlock new moves or use special attacks to take on the tougher boxers because what you see is what you get. The only difference between the first fight and the last is that the harder opponent gets up after he's been knocked down a couple of times. Look, I'm all for simple and accessible boxing games that don't take themselves too seriously, but Boxing Champs is lacking in almost every department. This is a game in desperate need of special moves and charge attacks. I'm not saying it needs fireballs or anything outlandish, but 3 basic attacks is not enough to hold my interest. There was never a point in the game where I feared that I was going to lose, and that's a problem. I was able to beat 30 computer-controlled boxers in a row by almost exclusively mashing the jab button. And it doesn't help that the modes are just as limited as the gameplay. We get a straightforward campaign, a single match exhibition, and a 2-player mode. There's no online multiplayer, so all the fighting you're going to do is going to go down on your couch. The 2-player matches are understandably more exciting than going up against the computer, but it's not enough to recommend Boxing Champs. And since we're talking about how every part of the game is lacking, it's worth mentioning that the graphics get old after 2 or 3 fights. I was initially into the cartoony presentation, but found the overhead perspective to be limiting. All the opponents start to blur together after a while, which is partially due to nobody having a discernible personality. And even though the game keeps telling me that we're traveling around the country, every single ring looks exactly the same. Sadly, sameness is the theme of Boxing Champs. It's not just that every ring looks the same, but every fight plays out the same way, the fighters all have the same moves, the action always has the same rhythm. It's all the same from the first fight to the last. Maybe that'll appeal to somebody looking for a very simple fighting game. But after going undefeated and earning the title belt, I think I'm going to retire on top and never play this game again. Boxing Champs isn't a bad game, it's just too simple for its own good. As a fighting game with only 3 moves, identical looking levels, characters with no personality, and only a limited selection of modes. But the real problem here is the difficulty, which allows for even the worst gamers to win handily by simply mashing the buttons. With no skill, excitement, or variety, Boxing Champs is a thoroughly forgettable sports game that knocks itself out. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite boxing game? I'm not a huge sports simulator guy, so it'd probably be something like Ready to Rumble or maybe Punch-Out. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, I'm still working on my review backlog. I'm also spending some time writing a bunch of new shows, so look for those in the very near future. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,